The city of Jackson Heights was restless that summer night. Streetlights buzzed overhead, illuminating cracked sidewalks and shuttered storefronts. In the distance, sirens wailed, weaving through the humid darkness. Marcus Hill, a 22-year-old mechanic, walked home from his late shift at the garage. His clothes were stained with grease, his hands rough from long hours under the hood of cars. All he wanted was a shower and some sleep, but fate had other plans. As Marcus cut through Lincoln Park, two patrol cars screeched to a halt beside him. Red and blue lights splashed across the trees. Officers leapt out, hands already on their weapons. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" one barked. Marcus froze, palms raised. "What's going on? I just got off work." "Shut it!" another officer snapped, slamming him against the hood of the car. "You match the description." Marcus's heart pounded. Description of what? Armed robbery, store clerks in the hospital, black male, dark hoodie. Marcus looked down at his oil-stained coveralls. He didn't even own a hoodie. "That's not me. I was at the shop all night. Ask my boss." His words were cut short by cold metal clicking around his wrists. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Marcus caught sight of a figure standing at the edge of the park. A woman in a long coat, her face half hidden in shadow. She raised a hand, almost as if to speak, but then melted back into the darkness. Marcus shouted, "Someone saw! Ask her!" But the door slammed, and his voice was drowned by the roar of the engine. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Detectives leaned across the table, firing questions like bullets. "Where were you between 9 and 10? At the shop. Anyone who can confirm that?" "My boss, Mr. Alvarez. He saw me." But Alvarez, when questioned, wavered. Business had been slow and he feared police scrutiny. "Maybe Marcus left early," he muttered. That hesitation was all the prosecution needed. At the trial, the case unraveled quickly. Witnesses were shaky, evidence circumstantial, but the jury saw only one thing: a young black man accused of violence. Marcus's public defender, overworked and underfunded, barely cross-examined. The officers testified with polished certainty. He fit the description, he resisted. "We found him near the scene." Marcus sat in silence, shackled, staring at the jurors who refused to meet his eyes. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, the gavel struck like thunder. His mother wept in the gallery. Marcus, numb, whispered, "I didn't do this." The judge's words sealed his fate. 15 years to life. Prison walls swallowed him. Days bled into months, months into years. Marcus worked in the laundry, read whatever books he could find, wrote letters that were rarely answered. He watched his youth slip away through the bars of a window. Still, he clung to hope. Somewhere out there, he believed, someone knew the truth. Somewhere, that woman in the park, the one who had seen it all, was carrying the secret that could set him free. The first year inside Ironwood Penitentiary crushed Marcus like a hammer. The clang of bars at dawn, the shouted orders, the shuffle of chains, all of it pressed down on him until every day felt like the same gray blur. At 5:30 a.m., guards barked them awake. Breakfast was powdered eggs and burnt toast, swallowed in a cavernous hall that smelled of bleach and sweat. By 6 o'clock, Marcus was in the laundry room, sorting uniforms stiff with grime. His hands, once meant for engines and gears, now folded shirts for men who hated him simply for breathing. Some inmates tested him early. A shove in the yard, a whispered threat in the showers. Marcus learned quickly that to survive, you had to balance strength with silence. He never swung first, but he didn't let himself get broken either. At night, when the noise settled into the hum of distant voices and rattling pipes, Marcus lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. He replayed that night in the park over and over. The lights, the cuffs, the woman in the long coat. Who was she? Why hadn't she spoken? Did she even realize she held his life in her hands? Letters were Marcus's lifeline. He wrote to his mother every week. "Ma, I'm okay. Don't cry for me. I know God sees the truth." Her replies were steady, always signed with love, but thinner over time. His younger brother stopped writing altogether. Friends faded into silence. The world outside kept moving, while Marcus's days stayed locked in place. By year 3, he started keeping a notebook, filling it with scraps of memory and prayers. He sketched cars he'd once dreamed of fixing, scribbled fragments of poetry he found in tattered library books. The act of writing became rebellion, proof that he was more than a number in orange. One evening, Marcus sat across from an older inmate named Reggie in the yard. Reggie had been inside for 20 years and carried himself with a kind of weary wisdom. "You keep staring at that fence like freedom's just on the other side," Reggie said, chuckling. Marcus sighed. "Because it should be. I didn't do what they said I did." Reggie's smile faded. "Half the men here say that, but you believe it different. I see it in your eyes. Hold on to that. Innocence is a fire, son. Don't let 'em put it out." Those words settled deep in Marcus's chest. He repeated them like a mantra whenever despair clawed at him. The years dragged on. Seasons shifted only by the color of leaves Marcus glimpsed through the narrow slit of his cell window. Snow fell, melted, bloomed into spring, burned into summer. Each cycle carried another piece of his youth away. Still, small sparks of hope flickered. A prison librarian slipped him extra books. A chaplain prayed with him on Sundays, reminding him that justice had a long memory. And always Marcus thought of the shadowed woman in the park. If she ever came forward, everything could change. By year 10, Marcus's reflection had transformed. Gray threaded through his hair, and fine lines etched around his eyes. Yet the fire inside him had not died. He had earned respect in the yard by helping others with appeals, poring over dusty law books until his eyes ached. Inmates began calling him Professor. "Man, you should have been a lawyer," one joked. Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe I will be, if I ever get out." But in the quiet of his cell, he wrestled with doubt. What if no one ever believed him? What if the woman in the coat never came forward? What if he died in here, his name forever stained by a crime he didn't commit? He closed his eyes and pictured his mother's face, lined with years of waiting. "I'll make it out, Ma," he whispered. "I don't know how, but I will." 15 years stretched like an eternity. Yet Marcus refused to let the system erase him. Every breath was resistance. Every prayer was proof. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that far beyond those prison walls, the woman in the coat still carried her secret, and soon that secret would begin to crack open. 15 years is a long time to carry a secret. For Evelyn Moore, every one of those years felt like another stone added to the load on her back. She still remembered that humid summer night like it was yesterday, the sirens, the shouts, the terrified look on the young man's face as police shoved him into the squad car. She had been only a few yards away, standing half hidden in her trench coat, and she had seen what the cops had ignored. Marcus Hill hadn't been anywhere near the robbery. She'd seen the real man sprinting past her minutes earlier, taller, heavier, his hoodie pulled low over his face. She could still hear the sound of his breath as he pushed past, the glint of a pistol in his waistband. But when the police turned their attention to Marcus, Evelyn froze. She should have shouted. She should have stepped forward. But fear clamped her throat shut. She had been on probation at the time, one misstep away from losing her daughter to child services. So she stayed silent, melting back into the shadows, letting Marcus's fate be sealed by her cowardice. In the years that followed, Evelyn tried to bury the memory. She moved apartments, switched jobs, even joined a church. On the outside, she built a life that looked respectable. But inside, guilt gnawed at her like rust eating through metal. Some nights she woke in a sweat, hearing Marcus's voice echoing in her head. "Someone saw! Ask her!" Her daughter, grown now, often caught her staring off at nothing. "Mom, are you okay?" she'd ask. Evelyn would force a smile. "Just tired, baby. Just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was drowning. One Sunday after service, Evelyn lingered in the church lobby while others filed out. A TV mounted on the wall played a news segment about wrongful convictions. The reporter's words cut her like glass. Studies show hundreds of innocent men remain behind bars, many serving decades for crimes they didn't commit. The screen shifted to an image of Marcus Hill, older now, gray streaking his hair, eyes weary but unbroken. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. 15 years, the anchor said. Hill has maintained his innocence from day one. Evelyn clutched her chest, whispering, "Lord, what have I done?" That night, unable to sleep, she pulled out an old shoebox from the back of her closet. Inside lay scraps of her past, letters, bills, a faded photo of her daughter as a child. And there, folded neatly, was the yellowed probation slip from the year Marcus was arrested. She stared at it, tears spilling down her cheeks. If she had spoken that night, maybe she would have been questioned, maybe even arrested. But Marcus would have been free. Her daughter found her crying on the floor. "Mom, what's wrong?" Evelyn shook her head, voice trembling. "Baby, I should have done the right thing. And because I didn't, a man has lost half his life." For days after, she walked through life in a fog. At work, her hands shook as she filed paperwork. At the grocery store, she dropped her wallet twice. Every shadow seemed to whisper, "Coward." Finally, she confided in her pastor. In the quiet of his office, she poured out the story. Every detail, every regret. When she finished, she collapsed into sobs. The pastor sat in silence and then said gently, "Evelyn, secrets rot the soul. God gives us chances to do right, even late. The truth may hurt, but it also heals. You can't change the past, but you can choose what you do now." That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, pen trembling in her hand. She began to write. "To whom it may concern, I was a witness the night Marcus Hill was arrested." The words flowed like confession, raw and painful. She described the man she saw running past, the gun at his hip. The way Marcus had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She admitted her fear, her silence, her guilt. When she finished, her hands ached from gripping the pen. She folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope, staring at the name she had scrawled across the front. Innocence Project. Her breath shook as she whispered, "Forgive me, Lord. And forgive me, Marcus." For the first time in 15 years, Evelyn felt the faintest flicker of peace. But peace wouldn't come fully. Not until Marcus Hill walked free. The envelope left Evelyn's trembling hands on a Tuesday morning. She slid it into the blue mailbox on the corner, her breath fogging in the cool air. As the metal door clanged shut, she whispered, "It's out of my hands now." The letter began its journey, first through a sorting facility, then to a small office in downtown Atlanta, the Southern Innocence Project. Inside, stacks of case files leaned against walls, manila folders stuffed with desperate pleas. Paralegal Jasmine Ortiz picked up Evelyn's envelope late Friday afternoon, just as she was about to leave for the weekend. She tore it open absent-mindedly, skimming the first lines. Her eyes widened. "I was a witness the night Marcus Hill was arrested." She sank into her chair, reading the entire letter twice. By the end, her hands shook. She had read hundreds of claims of innocence before, but this was different. This was a confession of silence, a key that could unlock a door closed for 15 years. On Monday morning, Jasmine placed the letter on the desk of attorney David Harlow, the director of the project. He adjusted his glasses, reading carefully, his brow furrowed, then lifted. "After all these years," he murmured, "this could be the missing piece." "But can we trust her?" Jasmine asked. "She admits she stayed silent for 15 years. David nodded slowly. "Guilt eats people alive. The timing doesn't matter as much as the details, and her description of the actual suspect matches the robbery report better than Marcus ever did." He closed the file on his desk and said, "Pull Hill's trial transcript. We're reopening this case." That afternoon, David drove 2 hours to Ironwood Penitentiary. The visiting room buzzed with low voices and clattering vending machines. When Marcus shuffled in, shackles clinking, his eyes were wary. David introduced himself, sliding the letter across the table. "Mr. Hill, I need you to read this." Marcus scanned the first lines, his brow furrowing. By the second paragraph, his hands trembled. By the end, tears blurred his vision. He whispered, "She saw me. She knew I was innocent all along." David leaned forward. "It's not everything, but it's a start. With this, we can petition for a new hearing." For the first time in years, Marcus let himself smile. 15 years I've been waiting for someone to believe me. Maybe this is it." Back at the Innocence Project office, the team dug into the case. Jasmine pulled Marcus's trial transcript, highlighting the weak spots. "The prosecution never had physical evidence," she said. "Just the officer's testimony and Alvarez saying Marcus might have left early." David tapped Evelyn's letter. "And now we have an eyewitness who contradicts both. She saw another man running armed in the same area." They drafted a motion for post-conviction relief, citing new evidence. The paperwork was thick, arguments carefully constructed, legal citations stacked like bricks. When it was finished, David looked at his team. "This isn't going to be easy. Courts hate reopening old cases. But this letter? It's our wedge. And Marcus Hill deserves his day in the light." Meanwhile, Evelyn lived in constant fear. Every knock on the door made her jump. At night she lay awake, wondering if Marcus would hate her for waiting so long. At church, she confessed to her pastor again. "What if the judge throws it out? What if my words aren't enough?" The pastor clasped her hands. "Truth has power, Evelyn. Sometimes it just takes time to be heard." 2 months later, the motion was filed in court. The news broke quietly at first. Innocence Project seeks new trial in 2005, conviction. But when reporters dug deeper and learned of a secret witness stepping forward, the story exploded. Local papers ran with it, talk shows debated it, and Marcus's name resurfaced in headlines after years of silence. Inside Ironwood, Marcus received the news from David himself. "We've got a hearing date," David said, grinning. Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of 15 years pressing against his chest. "I told them I didn't do it," he whispered, "and now maybe, finally, they'll have to listen." He looked at the gray walls around him, walls that had stolen his youth, his freedom, his future. And for the first time he saw a crack, a way out. The announcement of Marcus Hill's hearing spread through Jackson Heights like wildfire. For years, his name had been a faint echo, buried in old headlines and forgotten case files. Now it was on everyone's lips again. Local news led with it every night. Convicted 2005 robbery suspect gets new hearing after secret witness emerges. National outlets soon picked it up. Talk show hosts debated the story. What does it say about our justice system when a man spends 15 years in prison before a witness steps forward? In Ironwood, Marcus's fellow inmates slapped him on the back when the news aired on the Rec Room TV. "Man, you're finally gonna get your shot," one said. Marcus smiled faintly, but inside, nerves churned. He'd been disappointed too many times before to let hope run wild. Still, at night in his cell, he whispered to himself, "This is it, Marcus. This is the moment you've been waiting for." For Evelyn, the pressure was suffocating. Reporters camped outside her apartment, microphones shoved toward her whenever she stepped outside. "Are you the secret witness? Why did you wait 15 years? Do you believe Marcus Hill is innocent?" She kept her head down, refusing to answer. Only her pastor and her daughter knew the full truth. At home, her daughter confronted her one evening. "Mom, you can't keep hiding. If you're brave enough to write that letter, you're brave enough to stand in court." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Baby, I'm scared. What if they don't believe me? What if they call me a liar?" Her daughter's voice was firm. "Then you look them in the eye and tell them what you saw. You've been carrying this for 15 years. It's time to put it down." Meanwhile, David Harlow and his team at the Innocence Project worked tirelessly. They pulled every scrap of evidence from Marcus's case, highlighting inconsistencies the jury had overlooked. "The police reports say the suspect was at least 6 feet tall," Jasmine pointed out, flipping through documents. "Marcus is 5'9", and Evelyn described a man taller, heavier, wearing a hoodie. That matches the report better than Marcus ever did." David nodded. "Plus, there was no DNA, no fingerprints tying Marcus to the store, just shaky testimony and a boss who couldn't keep his story straight." He leaned back in his chair. "This case was paper thin from the start. With Evelyn's testimony, we might finally tear it wide open." The hearing date loomed closer. Marcus sat with David in the prison attorney room, nerves eating at him. "What if she backs out?" Marcus asked quietly. "What if she changes her mind again?" David met his eyes. "She's not backing out. She's lived with this too long. Trust me, Marcus. She wants to make it right." Marcus clenched his fists. "I've lost 15 years, 15 birthdays, 15 Christmases, 15 chances to hug my mom outside these walls. If this doesn't work," David's voice was steady, "it will. We're not going in there empty-handed. We're going in with the truth." On the day of the pre-hearing press conference, David stood before a crowd of cameras. Evelyn remained hidden, her identity still sealed by the court until she took the stand. "Marcus Hill has maintained his innocence from the very beginning," David said firmly. "Now, with new eyewitness testimony, we believe the court will finally see what should have been clear all along, that Marcus Hill did not commit this crime." Reporters shouted questions. One asked, "Can you confirm the witness's identity?" David shook his head. "No, but I can confirm this. The truth is finally coming to light." In a quiet room miles away, Evelyn watched the broadcast on television. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. She knew the world was waiting for her. Soon she would walk into that courtroom, look Marcus Hill in the eyes, and admit that her silence had stolen 15 years of his life. Her daughter touched her arm. "You can do this, Mom." Evelyn nodded slowly, though fear gnawed at her stomach. For him, for the truth, I have to. Back in his cell, Marcus knelt on the concrete floor that night, hands clasped tightly. Lord, let this be the end of it, he prayed. Let the truth come out. Let me see the sky without bars again. He opened his eyes, staring at the moonlight slanting through the slit window. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel endless. It felt like a door was beginning to open. The courthouse of Jackson Heights hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones flashing, cameras trained on every door. Veterans of the legal beat whispered that today's hearing could undo a conviction that had stood for 15 years. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators, family members, activists, curious locals. At the defense table sat Marcus Hill, hands clasped, dressed in a simple suit provided by the Innocence Project. It felt strange after so many years in prison garb, but he sat tall, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. Behind him, his mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Her voice broke as she whispered, "That's my boy. He finally looks like my boy again." The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise!" Judge Eleanor Watkins entered, robes flowing, her face unreadable. "Be seated." David Harlow rose immediately. "Your Honor, we present new evidence in the case of Marcus Hill, convicted in 2005 of armed robbery. We call our first witness, Evelyn Moore." A murmur rippled through the room. Spectators craned their necks as Evelyn entered, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She walked stiffly to the stand, avoiding Marcus's gaze, her face pale but resolute. After being sworn in, she sat, hands trembling in her lap. David approached gently. "Ms. Moore, can you tell the court where you were on the night of June 14, 2005? Evelyn's voice wavered at first, but steadied. "I was walking through Lincoln Park, near the corner where the police stopped Marcus Hill." "And what did you see?" She closed her eyes briefly. "I saw a man run past me. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark hoodie. He had a gun at his hip. He pushed me aside before I could react." David leaned in. "Was that man Marcus Hill?" Her voice was clear now. "No, it wasn't him. Marcus was on the other side of the park, walking alone. He didn't have a gun. He didn't match that man at all." Gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's mother covered her mouth. David continued, "Why didn't you come forward at the time?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I was on probation then. I was terrified the police wouldn't believe me, that they'd turn it on me. I stayed quiet, and I've regretted it every day since. I let this man lose 15 years of his life because I was too afraid to speak." The judge's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, more in thought. David nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Moore." He turned. "No further questions." The prosecutor, a stiff man named Carlson, rose for cross-examination. His tone was sharp. "Ms. Moore, you admit you stayed silent for 15 years. Why should this court believe you now?" Evelyn lifted her chin. "Because the truth doesn't change." "Only my courage did," Carlson pressed. "Isn't it convenient that your memory suddenly clears after all this time?" Her hands trembled, but her voice held. "It never left me. I've seen Marcus's face in my nightmares every night for 15 years. That's why I'm here, to put it right." The gallery murmured in sympathy. Even some jurors shifted uncomfortably. At the defense table, Marcus finally met Evelyn's eyes. For a moment, time froze. She looked at him with silent apology, and he with a mixture of anger, pain, and unexpected gratitude. His jaw tightened, but then he gave the smallest nod. Evelyn's lips trembled. She knew he understood. Maybe not forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement. When the hearing recessed, the courthouse steps exploded with reporters. Headlines were already drafting themselves. "Secret witness testifies, Marcus Hill, not the robber." 15 years of silence broken in court. Inside, Marcus sat with David, barely breathing. "She told them," Marcus whispered. "She finally told them." David put a hand on his shoulder. "It's not over yet. But today, we cracked the wall." That night, Evelyn returned home, collapsing into her chair. Her daughter hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you, Mom." Evelyn shook her head, tears flowing freely. "Don't be proud of me. I should have spoken years ago." Her daughter whispered back, "But you spoke now, and that's what matters." In his cell that night, Marcus stared out at the moon through the narrow window. For 15 years, hope had been a fragile thread. Now it felt like a rope pulling him toward freedom. He whispered into the darkness, I'm coming home." By the next morning, Evelyn Moore's testimony had swept across every major news outlet, her trembling voice on the stand replayed on TV screens nationwide. Clips circulated online, her declaring, "The truth doesn't change, only my courage did." The words lit social media on fire. Headlines blared, "Witness breaks silence after 15 years." "Marcus Hill's conviction in jeopardy." "Justice delayed, justice denied." The world that had once forgotten Marcus Hill now could not look away. At Ironwood Penitentiary, guards escorted Marcus to the recreation room where the TV blared with coverage of his hearing. Inmates gathered around, some clapping him on the back, others shaking their heads in disbelief. "You might really walk out of here, Hill," one said with a grin. Marcus kept his face calm, but his heart raced. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, his name spoken outside these walls not as a criminal, but as a man wronged. Yet part of him still braced for disappointment. Hope had been dangerous before. He wasn't ready to give it his full trust. Evelyn, meanwhile, faced the storm outside her door. Reporters camped on her sidewalk, neighbors stopped her in grocery aisles. Some thanked her for finally speaking up, others scolded her for waiting so long. At church that Sunday, members approached with cautious smiles. "You did the right thing, Evelyn," her pastor said firmly. "Late, but right." She nodded, tears welling. "I just pray it's enough." In the Innocence Project office, David Harlow and his team worked tirelessly. They filed an urgent motion to vacate Marcus's conviction, citing Evelyn's testimony as new evidence of innocence. David knew the prosecution would fight hard, but momentum was on their side. "The public is behind us," Jasmine said, scrolling through comments online. "Veterans, clergy, even politicians are calling this a miscarriage of justice." David leaned back, tapping his pen. "That helps, but courts care about law, not headlines. We need more." "What about Alvarez?" Jasmine asked, referring to Marcus's old boss who had wavered in his testimony. David nodded. "If we can get him to admit he was pressured or that he remembers differently now, it could bolster our case. Track him down." Meanwhile, Marcus's mother became a quiet force outside the courtroom. She appeared on local news, holding a framed photo of her son at age 22, smiling in grease-stained coveralls. "My boy wasn't perfect," she said, voice trembling, "but he wasn't a robber. He was a mechanic. He fixed cars, not steal from stores. 15 years they stole from him. I just want my son home." The clip went viral. Hashtag surged. Had free Marcus Hill, had justice for Marcus, and 15 years too long. The prosecution, however, wasn't ready to fold. District Attorney Raymond Cook held a press conference, stern-faced before a row of flags. "This case was tried by a jury of peers," he said. "A conviction was rendered. While we respect new testimony, we must also respect the integrity of our system. We urge the public not to rush to judgment." But the public had already decided. Commentators blasted Cook's remarks as tone-deaf. "Integrity of the system?" one anchor scoffed. "Where was the integrity when a man was convicted without physical evidence?" In the days that followed, rallies formed outside the courthouse. Hundreds marched with signs, "Free Marcus Hill," "Truth can't wait." Local clergy led prayers, students painted murals, and community leaders demanded reform. Marcus's name was no longer buried in a dusty file. It was a rallying cry. Back in prison, Marcus received a letter slipped under his cell door. He unfolded it carefully. "Mr. Hill, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm with you until the end. Evelyn." Marcus stared at the handwriting, a swirl of emotions crashing over him. Anger, relief, gratitude, pain. After a long moment, he pressed the paper to his chest. "Maybe we both get free," he whispered. The court scheduled a full evidentiary hearing. Marcus would finally have a chance not only to challenge the old verdict, but to stand in a courtroom as a man fighting for his name. For 15 years, he had been defined by the word convict. Now, for the first time, he saw a glimpse of another word waiting for him: innocent. The weeks leading up to Marcus's evidentiary hearing were a blur of strategy meetings, late-night phone calls, and endless stacks of paperwork. At the Southern Innocence Project office, files covered every surface. David Harlow and his team moved like generals preparing for battle. "We have Evelyn's testimony," David said during one meeting, pacing the room. "That alone is strong, but we need more. We need to dismantle every pillar the prosecution built 15 years ago." Jasmine nodded, tapping a highlighted page in the old trial transcript. The weakest link was always Alvarez, Marcus's boss. If we can get him to admit he wasn't sure or that he was pressured, we blow a hole in the state's case. David pointed to another paralegal. Find him. See if he's willing to talk. 2 days later, they located Alvarez in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Once a garage owner, now a tired man working part-time shifts at a hardware store, Alvarez looked like he carried his own regrets. When David and Jasmine knocked on his door, he hesitated before letting them in. "I know why you're here," he muttered, leading them to a cluttered kitchen. "Then you know Marcus's life is still hanging on your words," David replied. Alvarez rubbed his forehead. "Back then, I panicked. The cops came to me, said Marcus matched the suspect. I told them he was working that night, but they pushed. 'Are you sure? Maybe he left early?' I caved. I said maybe. But the truth is, he was there the whole time. I just didn't want trouble." Jasmine leaned forward. "Would you be willing to testify to that under oath?" Alvarez looked down at his calloused hands. After a long silence, he nodded. "Yes, I owe Marcus that much." When David relayed the news to Marcus at Ironwood, the younger man's chest tightened with hope. "He's finally telling the truth?" David smiled. "Yes. Evelyn's words and Alvarez's correction together, that's powerful." Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly. 15 years, and now people are finally saying what they should have said from the start. Meanwhile, Evelyn wrestled with her own demons. Each night she sat with her daughter, rehearsing her testimony for the full hearing. "They'll attack me," she said, voice shaking. "They'll say I'm lying, that I'm seeking attention." Her daughter squeezed her hand. "Then tell them what you've been telling me, that you stayed silent out of fear and you couldn't carry it anymore. They can argue, but they can't erase the truth." Evelyn nodded, tears brimming. "I just want him to walk free. I want to know I did the right thing before it's too late." The prosecution wasn't idle. District Attorney Cook assembled his own team, determined not to let a 15-year-old conviction crumble easily. In his office, he barked orders. Dig into Evelyn's past, find anything, arrests, debts, inconsistencies. If we can discredit her, we can weaken the defense. One aide hesitated. "Sir, the public sentiment is overwhelmingly with Hill. Going too hard could backfire." Cook slammed his fist on the desk. "The integrity of the system is at stake. We can't just throw out jury verdicts because someone changes their story 15 years later." But even he knew momentum was slipping. As the hearing date neared, media coverage intensified. National networks aired documentaries on wrongful convictions, using Marcus's case as a centerpiece. Churches held prayer vigils. Civil rights groups organized rallies. On social media, #FreeMarcusHill trended daily. One viral post showed a photo of Marcus at 22 beside a prison photo 15 years later, captioned, "This is what silence costs." The night before the hearing, Marcus sat in his cell, staring at the envelope Evelyn had sent. He unfolded her letter again, running his fingers over the words. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I will not be silent again." For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to believe, truly believe, that freedom was within reach. He whispered into the darkness, "Tomorrow, I get my life back." The morning of the evidentiary hearing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself carried the weight of what was about to unfold. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters, protesters, and supporters holding signs. "Free Marcus Hill, 15 years too long, and justice delayed is justice denied." Inside, the air was thick with tension. Marcus sat at the defense table beside David Harlow, his suit pressed but his hands trembling slightly. Behind him, his mother squeezed a folded handkerchief, lips moving in silent prayer. Evelyn sat several benches back, eyes downcast, her daughter's hand gripping hers tightly. The judge entered. "We are here today to determine whether new evidence warrants vacating Marcus Hill's conviction. Counsel, proceed." David rose first. "Your Honor, we present testimony from Mr. Hill's former employer, Mr. Daniel Alvarez, whose statements at trial were crucial in securing the original conviction. Mr. Alvarez is now prepared to correct the record." The bailiff called Alvarez to the stand. The man looked older, wearier than in Marcus's memory. His once strong frame had slumped, but his voice carried steady. "Mr. Alvarez," David began. "Where was Marcus Hill on the night of June 14, 2005? Alvarez cleared his throat. "He was with me, at the garage, working late. He never left." A ripple went through the courtroom. David pressed gently. "At trial, you suggested Marcus might have left early. Why did you say that?" Alvarez's eyes fell. "Because the police leaned on me. They made me doubt myself. They said maybe he slipped out. I was scared, didn't want trouble. But the truth is, Marcus never left. I lied by omission. And I've carried that guilt for 15 years. David let the silence hang before speaking. So to be clear, Marcus Hill could not have committed that robbery? Alvarez looked directly at Marcus. No, he couldn't have. He was with me. Gasps echoed across the gallery. Marcus's mother buried her face in her hands, weeping. Marcus closed his eyes, a tear slipping free, whispering, "Thank you." When cross-examination began, Prosecutor Cook's tone was sharp. "Mr. Alvarez, you admit you lied under oath 15 years ago. Why should this court trust you now?" Alvarez met his gaze without flinching. "Because I'm tired of carrying the lie. Because Marcus doesn't deserve another day behind bars. Believe me or not, but I know the truth." The prosecutor scowled, but the damage was done. The gallery buzzed with energy. The wall built against Marcus 15 years ago had finally begun to crack. During recess, reporters crowded the courthouse lawn. Two witnesses now claim Marcus Hill was wrongfully convicted, one anchor reported live. Public pressure is mounting on the district attorney's office to admit error. Back inside, Marcus leaned toward David. "For the first time, I feel like they see me. Not a criminal, just me." David smiled faintly. "That's because the truth is finally speaking louder than the lies." When court resumed, David called Marcus himself to the stand. "Mr. Hill," he began softly, "how long have you maintained your innocence?" Marcus's voice carried a mix of exhaustion and strength. "From the first night, I told the cops, I told the jury, I told anyone who would listen, but nobody did. Not until now." He looked at the judge, his voice breaking. "I lost 15 years. 15 years I'll never get back. Birthdays, holidays, chances to build a life, all because of silence and lies. But I'm still here, and I'm asking you, don't let me lose another day." The gallery was silent. Even Judge Watkins's eyes softened. As the day ended, Evelyn finally found the courage to meet Marcus's gaze across the courtroom. He held her stare for a long, heavy moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And for Evelyn, that single gesture felt like the first sunrise after years of darkness. The judge adjourned. "This court will reconvene tomorrow for further testimony and closing arguments." Outside, the chants grew louder. "Free Marcus! Free Marcus!" Marcus, led back to his holding cell, closed his eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow could be the day." The second day of the hearing dawned bright, the courthouse lawn already filled with protesters and supporters. Signs waved above the crowd. "Truth matters," "Justice for Marcus," "15 years stolen." News vans lined the block, their cameras pointed at the courthouse steps like cannons waiting for the next shot. Inside, the air was even heavier than the day before. The gallery buzzed with whispers, but when Judge Watkins entered, silence fell. "Proceed," she ordered. The prosecution opened with fire. District Attorney Cook paced before the jury box, voice sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot allow the justice system to be overturned because of guilt-ridden memories and changed stories. The defendant was convicted by a jury. The verdict must stand." He turned toward Evelyn, who sat rigidly in the gallery. "Witnesses who wait 15 years to come forward are unreliable. Memories fade. Motives change." Murmurs rippled, but David Harlow rose calmly for the defense. "Your Honor, if Ms. Moore's memory had faded, she could not have described the actual suspect so precisely. Taller, heavier, armed with a pistol. Details that match the original police report, not Marcus Hill. The prosecution wants to call her unreliable, but the truth is her account finally fills the gaps in their flimsy case." Next, David called Alvarez back to clarify. "Mr. Alvarez, yesterday you admitted to being pressured. Today, under oath, do you stand by your statement that Marcus Hill never left the garage that night?" Alvarez's voice was firm. "Yes, I stand by it. He was there." Cook pounced. "So yesterday you admitted lying in court 15 years ago, and today you expect us to believe you've suddenly found your conscience?" Alvarez didn't flinch. 15 years ago, I was scared. Today, I'm ashamed. That's the difference. And I won't let my silence steal another day of Marcus's life." The courtroom hummed with energy. Even some reporters scribbled with knowing looks. The state's case was unraveling. David then presented a new piece of evidence, a sworn affidavit from another mechanic who had worked briefly at the garage, confirming he'd seen Marcus that same night. Though his memory wasn't perfect, It added weight to Alvarez's testimony. "Your Honor," David concluded, "the picture is clear. Marcus Hill was convicted not on evidence, but on fear, silence, and pressure. Today, that silence has been broken. Justice demands correction." During recess, the courthouse steps erupted with cheers. Civil rights leaders gave speeches, veterans prayed aloud, and strangers hugged Marcus's mother, whispering, "We're with you." Inside a holding cell, Marcus sat with David, his nerves visible. "Do you think she'll overturn it?" David leaned forward. "The judge has discretion, but the prosecution is bleeding credibility and the public is watching. She knows the weight of this moment. Hold tight, Marcus. We're closer than ever." Marcus nodded, clutching Evelyn's letter in his pocket. "Closer than I've ever been in 15 years. When court reconvened, Judge Watkins called for closing statements. Cook went first. "The defense wants you to believe their witnesses, but the fact remains. 15 years ago, a jury found Marcus Hill guilty. The system worked. If we unravel verdicts every time someone changes their story, we weaken the rule of law. Don't let emotion cloud discipline." David rose slowly, his voice calm but commanding. "The rule of law is not weakened by correcting injustice, it is strengthened. Marcus Hill lost 15 years because of silence and fear. But silence has broken and the truth is clear. Justice delayed must not become justice denied." He gestured toward Marcus. "This man has waited long enough. He deserves his freedom." The judge recessed for the day. Outside, chants shook the courthouse walls. "Free Marcus! Free Marcus!" Evelyn stood apart from the crowd, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered to her daughter, "I told the truth. Now the rest is up to God." That night, back in his cell, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every nerve in his body buzzed. Tomorrow, the judge would deliver her ruling. Tomorrow, he might walk free, or return to his cage. He closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Please, let this be the end." The courthouse was packed tighter than ever. People lined the steps outside, chanting Marcus Hill's name, while inside, every bench was filled to capacity. The buzz of anticipation hung in the air like static before a storm. Marcus sat at the defense table, his suit pressed but his hands trembling. He could hear his mother's soft sobs behind him, Evelyn's whispered prayers, and the clicking of reporters' cameras. Every sound seemed magnified. 15 years of waiting had come down to this moment. Judge Eleanor Watkins entered, her face a mask of solemnity. The bailiffs booming, "All rise," echoed, and then silence fell. "Be seated," the judge said. She shuffled her papers, her expression unreadable. David Harlow leaned toward Marcus, whispering, "Whatever happens, remember, we've opened the door. This isn't the end." Marcus nodded, though his heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. Judge Watkins cleared her throat. "This court has reviewed the new testimony provided by Evelyn Moore and Daniel Alvarez, as well as supporting evidence presented by the defense." She paused. The room held its breath. Mr. Alvarez's admission of error at the original trial casts significant doubt on the reliability of the prosecution's case. Furthermore, Ms. Moore's eyewitness testimony provides a credible alternative narrative that aligns with the original police report. Taken together, these factors establish substantial evidence of possible wrongful conviction. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Marcus clenched his fists, staring at the floor. The judge continued, "The court does not take lightly the task of overturning a jury verdict. However, the law demands not only finality, but fairness, and fairness requires that justice be based on truth." She looked directly at Marcus. "Therefore, the conviction of Marcus Hill is vacated. The defendant is to be released immediately, pending further review. The state may elect to retry the case, but in light of the evidence presented, this court strongly urges dismissal." The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The courtroom exploded. Cheers, sobs, shouts of joy filled the air. Marcus's mother collapsed into tears, clutching the photo of her son she had carried to every hearing. Evelyn buried her face in her daughter's arms, relief and guilt colliding in her chest. Reporters rushed for the doors, eager to blast the news. Marcus Hill's conviction overturned after 15 years. Marcus sat frozen for a moment, the words struggling to sink in. Released, vacated, free. David gripped his shoulder, smiling for the first time in weeks. "You're going home, Marcus." Marcus swallowed hard. "Home," he whispered, as if testing the word on his tongue. As deputies removed his shackles, Marcus stood slowly. He turned toward the gallery, locking eyes with his mother. She rushed forward, wrapping him in a trembling embrace. "My baby," she sobbed, "you're coming home." For the first time in 15 years, Marcus hugged her without chains between them. His chest heaved as tears finally broke free. "I told you, Ma, I told you I didn't do it." She pressed her hand to his cheek. "And I never stopped believing you." Evelyn stepped forward, hesitant, eyes red from crying. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. The weight of 15 years pressed between them. Finally, he spoke, voice low but firm. "You should have spoken then." "I know," Evelyn whispered, tears streaming. "I failed you. But I'm here now, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Marcus studied her, then gave a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. Outside, the courthouse steps erupted into a sea of cheers as Marcus emerged. Reporters shoved microphones forward, cameras flashed like lightning. "Marcus, how does it feel to be free after 15 years?" He paused, looking out at the crowd. The sun warmed his face, unfiltered by bars for the first time in a decade and a half. "It feels," he said slowly, "like the truth finally caught up." The crowd roared. That night, back at his mother's home, Marcus sat on the porch as the cicadas hummed in the dark. He stared at the stars, the same ones he had watched through a tiny prison window for so long. He whispered, 15 years gone, but tonight, I'm free." Marcus Hill woke to the smell of bacon sizzling in a pan. For a moment, confusion clouded his mind. There was no clanging of metal doors, no guard shouting, "Count time." Instead, sunlight streamed through floral curtains, and his mother hummed softly in the kitchen. He sat up on the couch where he had fallen asleep the night before, still in the suit he wore from court. The cushions were softer than any prison mattress he had known. For the first time in 15 years, he had slept without chains. His mother appeared, balancing a plate of eggs and bacon. Tears welled in her eyes as she set it before him. "Your first breakfast home," she whispered. Marcus picked up the fork, his hands trembling. The taste hit him like a flood of memories. Sunday mornings before everything was stolen. He chewed slowly, savoring each bite. "It feels real now," he said quietly. "I'm free." But freedom was not simple. That afternoon, David stopped by with stacks of paperwork. "Marcus, the conviction's been vacated, but technically the DA's office could choose to retry the case. We'll push hard for dismissal, but until then, we need to keep preparing." Marcus's jaw tightened. "So it's not over?" "Not yet, but the weight has shifted. They don't have a case anymore, and public opinion is on your side. That matters." Marcus nodded slowly. He had lived too long in uncertainty to let hope run unchecked. Outside, the media storm raged on. News vans parked along the street, anchors broadcasting live. Neighbors gathered at the fence, some cheering, others whispering. Signs appeared on the lawn. "Welcome home, Marcus." Reporters shouted questions as he stepped outside. "Marcus, do you plan to sue the state? What's your message to the DA's office? Do you forgive the witness who stayed silent?" He raised a hand, his voice calm but steady. "I just want time with my family. 15 years is a lot to make up for. The rest, we'll see." Meanwhile, District Attorney Raymond Cook sat in his office staring at stacks of files. The press was tearing him apart, critics calling his handling of Marcus's case a symbol of systemic failure. One aide ventured, "Sir, with Evelyn and Alvarez testifying and the public outcry, maybe it's time to dismiss." Cook scowled. "Dismissal means admitting we were wrong. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that," but deep down he knew the tide had turned. Evelyn, too, struggled with her new reality. Strangers left flowers at her door, thanking her for her courage, while others scrawled angry notes. Too little, too late. At church, some hugged her tightly, others avoided her gaze. She carried both reactions like stones in her pockets. One night, she called David. "Do you think Marcus will ever forgive me?" David's voice was gentle. "Forgiveness isn't the point right now. You gave him the chance to walk free. Let time do the rest." For Marcus, the hardest part was adjusting to a world that had moved on without him. He stood in a grocery store, staring at rows of self-checkout machines, baffled. Cell phones glowed in people's hands like pieces of the future. His cousin Malik laughed softly, guiding him. "Don't worry, man, you'll catch up. Just takes time." But Marcus felt the gap in his chest. 15 years of life stolen, technology, music, even slang that felt foreign. Still, he forced himself to learn. He refused to let prison define the rest of his life. At night, he sat on the porch with his mother, watching the stars. "Do you think Dad sees me?" he asked quietly. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father sees you. He sees the man who fought for truth and never gave up." Marcus swallowed hard. "I don't want to waste another day. I want to work, help people, maybe even talk to kids about what happened, to make sure they know the system can fail, but you can still fight." His mother smiled through tears. "That's the son I raised." Back at the DA's office, pressure mounted. Civil rights groups filed petitions. Editorials demanded action. Headlines read, "Will the state retry Marcus Hill?" The community waited for Cook's answer, and Marcus, sitting on his porch, whispered to himself, "I survived 15 years in a cage. Whatever comes next, I'll survive that too." For the first time, he truly believed it. District Attorney Raymond Cook sat alone in his office long after the courthouse lights had gone dark. Papers were scattered across his desk. Marcus Hill's original case file, the transcripts from the evidentiary hearing, and fresh stacks of editorials condemning the prosecution. The phone rang with another call from a reporter. He let it go to voicemail. He couldn't face more questions he didn't yet have answers for. On the wall behind him hung a framed motto, "Justice above all." Cook stared at it, his jaw tight. For years he had prided himself on being a man who upheld the law, but now the words mocked him. His aides wanted a decision. Retry Marcus Hill or dismiss the charges entirely. Neither choice felt easy. To retry would be political suicide. To dismiss meant admitting his office had destroyed a man's life. Meanwhile, Marcus was learning how to breathe again. At his mother's house, he rose early, stepping out onto the porch just to watch the sunrise. For 15 years, he had seen it only through bars, a sliver of color cut by steel. Now the horizon stretched wide, a canvas of pink and gold. Neighbors came by with casseroles and handshakes. Old friends stopped to hug him, some apologizing for fading away when he was locked up. Marcus accepted each gesture quietly, still adjusting to the strangeness of freedom. His cousin Malik teased him as they walked through downtown. "Man, you look like a tourist. Stop staring at every billboard." Marcus chuckled softly. 15 years, Malik. The whole world changed while I was gone. But not everyone was welcoming. At a gas station, two men muttered as Marcus walked past, "That's the guy from TV, the convict." Marcus's chest tightened, the old shame creeping back. He reminded himself, vacated, not guilty, free, but the label clung stubbornly. That night he confessed to his mother, "Even out here, I feel trapped sometimes." She cupped his cheek gently. "It takes time. But you're not a prisoner anymore, Marcus. Don't let their words chain you." Evelyn, too, felt the ripple of her decision. She received letters, some thanking her for finally stepping forward, others condemning her for the years of silence. She read every one, absorbing the praise and the scorn alike. At church, her pastor called her to the pulpit. "Evelyn Moore reminded us that truth delayed is still truth," he said. The congregation applauded, but Evelyn's eyes stayed on the floor. She knew the applause couldn't erase Marcus's lost years. Her daughter told her later, "Mom, you're brave." Evelyn shook her head. "No, brave would have been speaking that night. This is just trying to undo the damage." Public pressure grew daily. Rallies marched outside the DA's office with signs reading, "Drop the case" and "Justice for Marcus." Civil rights leaders called Marcus a symbol of resilience. News anchors debated whether the DA would admit fault. Cook's phone buzzed constantly with calls from lawmakers. Some urged dismissal. Others warned against setting a precedent. Finally, Cook convened a meeting with his senior staff. "Let's be honest," one aide said. "We have no case. Evelyn's testimony matches the police report. Alvarez admitted he was pressured, and the public won't tolerate a retrial. We'd be crucified." Cook rubbed his temples. "And if we dismiss, we admit we stole 15 years from a man who was innocent. How does this office recover from that?" Another aide spoke softly, "By showing courage now, by proving that justice means correcting wrongs, not clinging to them." That evening, Marcus received a visit from David. They sat on the porch, the summer air heavy with the hum of cicadas. "The DA's under immense pressure," David said. "He hasn't decided yet, but momentum's with us. If he dismisses, you'll be fully cleared. If he retries..." Marcus's stomach knotted. "I can't go back, David. I can't live through that again." David shook his head. "You won't. We'll fight. And this time, the world is watching." Marcus looked out at the horizon, whispering, "I just want peace. That's all I've ever wanted." Across town, Cook stood at his office window, staring at the protesters chanting below. "Free Marcus! Free Marcus!" Their voices rose like a tide, pounding against the walls of his resolve. For the first time in his career, Raymond Cook wasn't sure what justice demanded, or whether he had the courage to deliver it. The following Saturday, the town square of Jackson Heights overflowed with people. Banners stretched across lampposts. "Justice for Marcus Hill, 15 years too long." Community leaders, clergy, and activists had organized a rally to demand the DA drop all charges. Marcus hadn't planned to speak. He was still adjusting to the sensation of freedom, to the weight of people's eyes on him. But as the chants echoed, "Free Marcus! Free Marcus!" David leaned toward him. "They want to hear from you," the lawyer whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. His palms were damp, his chest tight. He had spent 15 years shouting his innocence into the void. Now, for the first time, people were listening. When he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. The noise was overwhelming, cheers, clapping, flags waving. He raised a hand and slowly the square quieted. Marcus's voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each word. "I never thought I'd stand here today. For 15 years, I sat in a cell for something I didn't do. I missed birthdays, holidays, the chance to build a life. I lost time I'll never get back. But I survived." The crowd cheered, but he lifted his hand again. "I survived because I believe the truth matters. And today, looking at all of you, I see that you believe it too. This fight isn't just about me, it's about every person who has been silenced, every family who has carried injustice alone. Together, we are louder than lies." The square shook with applause. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on his face. Evelyn stood near the front, tears streaming down her cheeks. Hearing Marcus's voice pierce the air after years of silence cracked something open inside her. She had dreaded this moment, afraid he would denounce her publicly. But instead, his words carried no bitterness, only determination. Her daughter squeezed her hand. "Mom, you see, he's stronger than what they did to him. And so are you." Evelyn whispered, "I hope one day he can forgive me." Back at the DA's office, Raymond Cook watched the rally live on television. Marcus's words filled the room, punctuated by the roar of the crowd. Cook's aides glanced nervously at him, but he said nothing. Inside, however, the speech landed like a hammer. Cook had built his career on the idea that the system was infallible, but here stood Marcus, living proof that the system could fail, spectacularly. The rally continued with other speakers. Civil rights leaders called for reforms. Local pastors prayed aloud for justice. Veterans spoke of honoring sacrifice. Each voice added weight to the chorus, demanding freedom not just for Marcus, but for truth itself. As the sun dipped low, the crowd lit candles, their flames glowing like a constellation against the dusk. Marcus stood among them, holding one himself. For the first time, he felt not just like a survivor, but like a man with a voice that mattered. The next day, the media replayed his speech on every network. Headlines read, "Marcus Hill breaks silence at rally. Wrongfully convicted man speaks to thousands." The truth finally heard. Editorials pressed harder than ever. DA Cook must dismiss this case. Justice demands nothing less. That evening, Marcus returned home exhausted but lighter. He sat on the porch with his mother, the night air cool around them. "You spoke from the heart," she said softly. "Your father would be proud." Marcus leaned back, looking at the stars. "For years I thought my voice didn't matter. But maybe it was just waiting for the right time." His mother smiled. "And now the world is listening." Across town, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, writing another letter. This one wasn't for the courts, but for Marcus himself. "Marcus, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know. I see your strength and I see the man you are. Your words yesterday showed me what real courage is. Thank you for not letting my silence destroy you. I will stand by you until the end." She folded it, sealing it with trembling hands. This time, she wasn't hiding in the shadows. Back in his office, Cook stared at the growing mountain of pressure. Petitions, op-eds, phone calls from lawmakers. He could hear the chants from the square even in his dreams. For the first time in his long career, Raymond Cook felt the ground shift beneath him. And he knew a decision could no longer be delayed. District Attorney Raymond Cook had not slept in days. His office, once a fortress of authority, now felt like a cage. The phone rang constantly, journalists demanding statements, lawmakers pressing for updates, activists demanding justice. petitions with tens of thousands of signatures piled high on his desk. Everywhere he turned, Marcus Hill's name stared back at him. On the news, on protest signs, in his inbox. Cook sat with his senior advisors late one night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across their tired faces. "We can't hold out much longer," one aide admitted. "The public wants dismissal. If you move to retry, it'll look like you're punishing Marcus all over again." Cook slammed a fist on the table. "And if I dismiss, I admit we failed. 15 years stolen from an innocent man, that stain will follow me forever." Another aide leaned forward. "Sir, the stain isn't in admitting it. The stain is in refusing to fix it." Cook stared at the table, jaw tight. For the first time in decades, he felt truly cornered. Meanwhile, Marcus was beginning to taste pieces of life he had almost forgotten. One morning, he visited the old garage where he used to work. The building was worn now, the paint peeling, the sign faded. But the smell of motor oil and steel brought back memories of who he had been before the prison walls. "You think you'll get back into it?" Malik asked, watching him run his fingers over an old engine block. Marcus shrugged. "Maybe. Cars don't lie to you. They break, but you can fix them. People are harder." Malik nodded quietly. Later that week, Marcus was invited to speak at a local high school assembly. At first he hesitated. He wasn't sure he wanted to keep reliving his pain. But when he stood before the students, their eyes wide, their notebooks open, something shifted. "I spent 15 years locked up for something I didn't do," he told them. "But you know what kept me going? Hope. Hope that one day the truth would matter. Don't ever think your voice doesn't count. One voice, spoken at the right time, can change everything." The gym erupted in applause. A teacher whispered, "They'll never forget this." Marcus walked out of the building with a strange feeling in his chest. Purpose. Evelyn watched the assembly online later that evening. Her heart swelled with pride for the man Marcus had become, but the guilt still gnawed. She whispered to her daughter, "Look at him. He's stronger than all of us. I only wish I'd found my courage sooner." Her daughter squeezed her shoulder. "What matters is you found it at all." Back in the DA's office, Cook's aides delivered grim news. Civil rights groups are planning a march downtown next week. Thousands are expected. They're calling it the Justice March for Marcus. If you haven't made a decision by then, you'll be facing the crowd head-on. Cook rubbed his temples. "This has gone beyond one man. It's become a movement." His aide replied softly, "That's because one man's pain revealed the cracks in the whole system." That night, Marcus sat on the porch with his mother, the air heavy with summer heat. Fireflies flickered in the yard, glowing against the dark. "Ma," he said quietly, "do you think the DA will let this go?" She sipped her tea before answering. "I think the truth is too loud to ignore now. You've got the world standing with you. Even if he doesn't want to see it, he will have to." Marcus nodded slowly, gazing at the stars. "I just want to live. To work. To love. To finally be free without looking over my shoulder." His mother touched his hand. "And you will, Marcus. You will." Across town, Cook sat alone in his dark office, watching footage of Marcus at the school assembly. The young man's voice carried conviction, not bitterness. One voice, spoken at the right time, can change everything. Cook leaned back in his chair, haunted by the words. For the first time, he wondered not about his career, not about politics, but about what justice truly meant. The morning of the march began with the steady beat of drums. From every corner of Jackson Heights, people poured into the streets, families carrying signs, veterans in uniform, students waving banners. By noon, the courthouse square was a sea of bodies, candles, and placards raised high. "Justice for Marcus! 15 years too long! Truth matters!" The chants rolled like thunder, shaking the windows of the district attorney's office. Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, overwhelmed. He had spent 15 years behind bars, convinced the world had forgotten him. Now tens of thousands filled the streets in his name. His chest tightened, not with fear but with awe. David Harlow nudged him. "They're waiting for you. You don't have to speak if you're not ready, but if you do, they'll listen." Marcus swallowed hard. He had never stood before such a crowd, yet deep down he knew he couldn't stay silent. He climbed the steps of the courthouse, microphones thrust toward him, cameras flashing. The noise died as he raised his hand. His voice, at first unsteady, cut through the summer air. "I never thought I'd see this day. For 15 years, I sat in a cell for something I didn't do. I lost time I can't get back. But today, I see that truth is louder than lies. You all standing here, You remind me that I was never alone." Cheers erupted, echoing off the courthouse walls. Marcus paused, letting the roar wash over him. He continued, stronger now. "This march isn't just about me. It's about every man and woman who's been silenced, every family who's carried injustice. When the system fails, it's voices like yours that force it to change." The square thundered in response. Strangers hugged, veterans saluted, children chanted his name. Inside his office above the square, D.A. Cook stood at the window, watching the crowd surge. The chants rattled his glass, each one a hammer against the wall of pride he had built around himself. An aide entered nervously. "Sir, the governor's office just called. They're watching this live. They want to know your decision." Cook didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on Marcus, standing tall in the sunlight, his words carried on the wind. Evelyn stood near the stage, tears streaking her cheeks. She clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, "He was supposed to be broken, but look at him. He's stronger than ever." Her daughter squeezed back. "That's because he finally has the truth behind him. And so do you, Mom." Evelyn nodded slowly, feeling the weight of years lift, piece by piece. The march stretched into the evening. Candles lit the square, their flames flickering against the twilight. Music swelled. Gospel choirs, drummers, voices rising in harmony. It felt less like a protest and more like a vigil, a community reclaiming hope. Marcus sat on the courthouse steps, watching children draw chalk hearts on the pavement. One little boy ran up, handing him a handmade sign that read, "Be strong." Marcus crouched down, smiling. "I'll try, little man." The boy grinned, then darted back into the crowd. By nightfall, national news carried the images live. Anchors spoke in reverent tones. Tens of thousands march for Marcus Hill. A movement bigger than one man. Pressure mounts on D.A. Cook to dismiss charges. Commentators called it a turning point, a moment that would define Jackson Heights for decades. Back home, Marcus collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. His mother placed a blanket over his shoulders. "You did good today," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "It wasn't me. It was all of them. Their voices carried me." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "For the first time, I feel free, not just from prison, but from silence." Across town, D.A. Cook sat alone at his desk. The chants still echoed in his ears, relentless. He stared at the words etched into the courthouse stone outside his window. Equal justice under law. For years he had believed those words without question. Now he realized they were not a guarantee. They were a demand. And tomorrow, he would have to decide whether he still believed in them. The morning after the march, Jackson Heights awoke with a different energy. Streets were littered with candle stubs and chalk messages scrawled on sidewalks. "Truth wins," "Justice for Marcus," "No more silence." The echoes of chanting still hung in the humid summer air. Marcus sat at his mother's kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. It was the first time in years he had the luxury of a slow morning. Yet peace eluded him. Every ring of the phone, every knock on the door made his stomach tighten. "Do you think he'll dismiss it?" he asked, voice low. His mother looked at him with weary eyes. The world saw what they needed to see yesterday. Cook can't fight the truth forever. Marcus stared into his cup. 15 years, Ma. I just want to hear it said out loud, that I'm innocent." Meanwhile, District Attorney Cook sat in his office, blinds drawn, the room dark despite the morning sun. His aides filed in, their faces tense. "The pressure isn't letting up," one said. "Editorials are everywhere. Civil rights leaders are calling this the biggest wrongful conviction case in the state's history." Another added, "If you push for retrial, you'll lose. Public opinion is already decided, and frankly, the evidence is against us." Cook rubbed his temples. "So dismissal makes me look weak. Retrying makes me look stubborn. Either way, I lose." His senior aide leaned forward. "Sir, it's not about how you look. It's about doing what's right." Cook didn't answer, but the words lodged in his mind. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked through his old neighborhood with Malik. Kids played basketball in cracked courts. Teenagers blasted music from phones. Some recognized Marcus, nodding respectfully. One young man jogged up. "Mr. Hill, can I get a picture? My mom told me about your case. You give us hope." Marcus froze for a moment, then smiled softly. "Hope's all we've got sometimes. Stay strong." As the boy ran off, Malik nudged him. "You see that? You're already changing people." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live." "Maybe you don't get to choose," Malik replied gently. Evelyn sat in her living room, News coverage replaying Marcus's speech from the march. She clutched the remote tightly, tears streaming as she heard him say, "This isn't just about me. It's about every man and woman who's been silenced." Her daughter sat beside her. "Mom, you helped make this possible." Evelyn's voice cracked. "I almost ruined his life. I stayed silent too long." Her daughter squeezed her hand. "And yet, when it mattered, you spoke. That's what history will remember." That evening, David Harlow met with Marcus in the backyard. Crickets chirped in the humid air as they sat beneath the fading light. "The DA has to announce his decision soon," David said. "My gut says he'll dismiss. He knows he doesn't have a case." Marcus leaned back, staring at the sky. "I want to believe that, but I've seen the system twist before. I can't relax until I hear the words." David nodded. "Then we wait. But know this. No matter what Cook decides, you've already won. The world knows you're innocent. They can't take that away." Marcus closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. It was true. For the first time in years, the world believed him. At City Hall, Cook prepared his statement. He practiced in front of the mirror, stumbling over words like dismissal and wrongful conviction. Each time his reflection stared back with accusing eyes. In his gut, he knew there was only one path forward, but pride still chained him. That night, Marcus sat on the porch, the cicadas singing. His mother joined him, handing him a glass of sweet tea. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when you were a boy and you told me you wanted to fix broken things?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Cars, radios, anything I could get my hands on." She nodded. "You've been fixing broken things your whole life, Marcus. Now maybe, just maybe, you're helping fix something bigger." He looked out at the night sky, heavy with stars. For the first time, he felt the possibility of peace. Not yet certain, not yet whole, but possible. And tomorrow, he hoped, the words he had waited 15 years to hear would finally be spoken. The courthouse plaza was packed before sunrise. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes angled skyward. Protesters and supporters alike filled the square, candles still flickering from the vigil the night before. The air buzzed with one question. What will DA Cook decide? Inside his office, District Attorney Raymond Cook paced the floor, his tie loosened, his speech draft clutched in his hand. He had rewritten it a dozen times. Each version felt wrong, too defensive, too weak, too hollow. His senior aide entered quietly. "Sir, the press is waiting. So is the community." Cook stared at the window where the chants drifted upward. "Justice for Marcus. Truth matters." He straightened his tie, grabbed the latest draft, and whispered to himself, "It ends today." Across town, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his mother and David Harlow. The television blared live coverage. "District Attorney Cook is expected to announce his decision within the hour," the anchor said. Marcus's mother clutched his hand tightly. "This is it, baby." Marcus's chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. "Whatever he says, I'm not the same man I was. They can't cage the truth again." David leaned forward. "Still, Marcus, if he dismisses, you'll be free in every sense. No shadow over your name." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "That's all I want." By mid-morning, Cook stepped onto the courthouse steps, cameras flashing like fireworks. The crowd erupted in boos and cheers, the mix of anger and hope deafening. He raised his hands for silence, the microphone trembling slightly as he began. 15 years ago, Marcus Hill was convicted of armed robbery. That conviction was upheld by this office and by the courts. But in recent weeks, new evidence has come to light, evidence that challenges the foundation of that verdict. The crowd grew still, every word hanging in the air. Cook swallowed hard. After reviewing witness testimony, employer statements, and corroborating reports, this office has determined that there is insufficient evidence to retry Mr. Hill. Therefore, he paused, the weight of history pressing down. The charges against Marcus Hill are hereby dismissed, effective immediately. The plaza exploded. Cheers thundered, people cried out, strangers embraced one another. Signs waved, cameras surged forward. Back at home, Marcus's mother collapsed into sobs, clutching his arm. "It's over, baby, it's finally over." Marcus sat frozen, the words echoing in his head. Charges dismissed. Slowly, a smile spread across his face, trembling with disbelief. "I'm free, really free." David grinned, shaking his hand. "Congratulations, Marcus, you just made history." At the courthouse, Cook continued, his voice strained. "This case is a tragedy, A tragedy of silence, of failure, of lost time. 15 years cannot be given back, but today we can acknowledge the truth. Marcus Hill is an innocent man. The words struck like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, but Cook turned and walked back inside, his face pale, his shoulders heavy. For him, it was the end of a career. For Marcus, it was the beginning of a life. Within minutes, Marcus's phone buzzed endlessly. News outlets begged for interviews. Friends he hadn't spoken to in decades called to say congratulations. His name trended online with hashtags, #FreeMarcus, #Justice Served, #Truth Wins. But Marcus ignored the noise. He stepped outside into the yard, looked up at the clear sky, and let the sun warm his face. For 15 years, he had dreamed of this moment. No bars, no chains, no courtroom shadows, just freedom. Evelyn watched the announcement from her living room, tears streaming freely. She fell to her knees, whispering, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." Her daughter wrapped an arm around her. "You did the right thing, Mom, and now he's free because of it." But Evelyn shook her head softly. "He's free in spite of me. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to make it right." That evening, Marcus walked into the town square where the crowd still celebrated. People swarmed him, cheering, hugging, snapping photos. He lifted his hands, smiling through tears. "I don't have fancy words," he said over the microphone someone handed him. "I just want to thank you for standing with me when I couldn't stand alone. You gave me back my life." The crowd roared, chanting his name as candles lit the night once more. As he walked home with his mother and Malik, Marcus whispered, 15 years they tried to bury me, but the truth rose up anyway. For the first time, he felt not just free, but whole. The days after the dismissal felt surreal. Marcus woke each morning half expecting to hear the clang of prison bars, but instead he was greeted by the smell of his mother's coffee, the chirp of birds outside, and the laughter of children playing in the street. Freedom was real, yet fragile, as if it might vanish if he blinked too long. Reporters hounded him for interviews, documentary filmmakers called, advocacy groups begged him to speak at events. Marcus declined most of them. "I just want to breathe," he told David Harlow, who respected his choice. Instead, Marcus focused on small, ordinary things, walking through the park without a guard at his side, eating ice cream with Malik, even sitting on the porch with his mother in the cool evening air. Each moment was a victory, but not everything came easily. At the grocery store, Marcus froze in front of the self-checkout machines, unsure how they worked. At a cafe, he fumbled with a smartphone Malik had given him, unable to navigate the screen. People stared, some with pity, others with curiosity. Later that night, Marcus confided to his mother, "The world feels faster than me, like it kept running while I stood still." She touched his hand gently. "That's because it did. But you'll catch up, one day at a time." Meanwhile, Evelyn wrestled with her own journey. She mailed Marcus the letter she had written during the march, pouring out her guilt and gratitude. Days later, she received an unexpected knock at her door. When she opened it, Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, Malik at his side. Evelyn froze, her breath catching. "I got your letter," Marcus said softly. Tears welled in her eyes. "Marcus, He raised a hand. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet. 15 years is a long time, but I know this. You found your voice, and because of that, I found mine." Evelyn's shoulders shook as she nodded. "I'll carry that guilt forever, but I'll also carry the truth now, and I'll stand beside you however I can." Marcus gave a small nod. "That's enough for today." The following week, Marcus attended his first community event as a free man. The Carter Foundation, an organization for wrongful conviction survivors, invited him to speak. The gymnasium was packed with families, activists, and young people eager to hear his story. Standing at the podium, Marcus adjusted the microphone. 15 years ago, I was silenced. But today, I speak not just for myself, but for everyone still fighting to be heard. Justice isn't a finish line. It's something we have to keep alive every day. The crowd erupted in applause, some chanting his name, others simply crying. Backstage, David clasped his shoulder. "You're becoming a leader, Marcus." Marcus shook his head. "I never asked for that." David smiled. "Leaders rarely do, but the people see your strength, and they need it." In quieter moments, Marcus returned to the garage. Alvarez had invited him back, offering to teach him the latest tools of the trade. For Marcus, the smell of grease and gasoline was grounding. Cars, he said, wiping his hands. They don't judge you. You fix them, they run. Simple. Alvarez looked at him with regret. I can't undo what I did, Marcus. But I want to help you rebuild now. Marcus studied him, then nodded slowly. Then let's start with this engine. At night, Marcus often sat with Malik on the porch, looking at the stars. Do you think 15 years wasted makes me weaker? He asked one evening. Malik shook his head firmly. No, it makes you stronger. You survived what most couldn't, and now your story is going to save others. Marcus exhaled, feeling the truth in those words. Then maybe it wasn't wasted after all. Across the city, D.A. Cook announced his resignation. In a press conference, he admitted, "This office failed Marcus Hill, and for that, I take responsibility." It was the closest thing Marcus would ever get to an apology from the man who had once sealed his fate. Watching on TV, Marcus felt no triumph, only a quiet release. "It's over," he whispered. His mother placed a hand on his back. "No, baby, it's just beginning." 6 months after the dismissal, Jackson Heights had changed. Murals of Marcus Hill appeared on brick walls downtown, his face surrounded by the words, "Truth Matters" and 15 years too long. His name was no longer spoken with pity or suspicion, but with respect. He had become a living reminder of resilience, a man who had walked through fire and come out standing tall. Marcus, though, was focused less on murals and headlines and more on rebuilding. He split his time between working at Alvarez's garage, speaking at community events, and spending quiet evenings with his mother. Slowly, the world began to feel less foreign. He could navigate a smartphone now, drive a car again, and shop without feeling overwhelmed. Each small victory felt like a piece of himself being restored. One afternoon, Marcus visited a local high school to speak with students. The gym buzzed with chatter until he stepped up to the microphone. "I lost 15 years because of silence," he began, "but I'm standing here to tell you, don't ever be afraid to speak the truth. Your voice matters, and one voice can change the course of someone's life." Afterward, students crowded him, asking questions, snapping photos, thanking him. One young girl whispered, "My brother's locked up for something he didn't do. You give me hope he'll come home." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't give up. Hope is stronger than chains." Meanwhile, Evelyn had become an unlikely ally in the movement. She joined advocacy groups, speaking openly about the cost of silence. At first, she was met with anger. Some called her coward, others said she didn't deserve to be involved. But Evelyn never argued back. She simply repeated, "I failed once, I will not fail again." At a rally in Atlanta, she spoke alongside Marcus. Her voice shook but carried. "I let fear keep me quiet, and it stole 15 years from an innocent man. I will carry that guilt forever. But if my story stops one person from staying silent, then maybe I can turn failure into something better." The crowd applauded, not for perfection, but for honesty. Marcus's mother, watching her son on stage, felt pride swell in her chest. She had prayed for this day for so long, not just for his freedom, but for him to find peace. At night, she would sit on the porch with him, holding his hand, whispering, "Your father would be proud. You've turned pain into purpose." Marcus would smile softly, gazing at the stars. "I just want to make sure no one else has to live what I lived." By autumn, the governor signed new legislation mandating reviews of past convictions with little or no physical evidence. Reporters called it the Marcus Hill Act. Marcus stood beside the governor as the bill was signed, cameras flashing. He didn't crave politics, but he knew laws mattered, and if his name helped others, it was worth it. One quiet evening, Marcus returned to Lincoln Park, the place where it had all begun. He walked slowly past the benches, the trees, the path where the squad cars had pulled up 15 years ago. The shadows felt different now, lighter. Evelyn met him there, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. Together, they laid them near the spot where Marcus's life had been torn apart. For a long while, they stood in silence. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Do you ever wish you could go back, change that night?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "Of course I do. But if I did, I wouldn't be who I am now. I wouldn't have this voice. I wouldn't have shown others that the truth can't stay buried forever." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "You're a better man than I deserve forgiveness from." Marcus looked at her, his voice calm. "I don't know if I can ever forget, but forgiveness, maybe that's not about you. Maybe it's about me, and I can't carry bitterness forever." She nodded, tears falling freely. As they parted ways, Marcus sat on a bench, the evening breeze cool against his skin. He thought of the boy he had been, 22 years old, walking home in coveralls, unaware of the storm about to engulf him. That boy had been silenced. But the